Hi, I'm Stephen Jones. At Robert Wood Johnson, we believe citizens need to be informed about the important healthcare issues affecting their lives. That's why we're proud to support the healthcare programming produced by the Caucus Educational Corporation.
Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by New Jersey Manufacturers, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital, the heart of academic medicine, QualCare Inc., a local managed care company covering 750,000 New Jersey residents, the law firm of Gibbons, P.C., United Airlines, and by New Jersey Natural Gas, proud to support education in our communities. Promotional support provided by NJ.com, small news, big news, true Jersey. And by NJ Biz, all business, all New Jersey.
This is One-on-One.
When you first heard that they were doing Charlie Rose and Gayle King, didn't you go, what?
People like laughing at others, so I don't mind if the other is me.
See, you go right into the character. That's what it is.
I'm bringing families together a half an hour each week. Man, I'm doing something special.
And so I do feel successful.
I'm Steve Adubato. I want to welcome two very interesting and special guests to our show. We have our friend George Anastasia, who's the author of Gotti Rules. It's a book, the story of John Alite, Junior Gotti, and the demise of the American Mafia, and John Alite is with us as well. I want to thank both of you for joining us. This is a New York Times, you are in fact a New York Times best-selling author, and this may in fact be a New York Times bestseller soon enough. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You've written a lot of books. You've been with us many times. You know the Philadelphia mob very well. Why did you take on this guy's story?
John called me out of the blue about a year and a half ago. He was out of prison, and he said he wanted somebody to tell his story. I knew a little bit about the backstory, and I always wanted to do a story that had the New York backdrop. It's a bigger stage, and I think you can say more, and that's what I tried to do here.
So, John, let's do this. By the way, go out and get the book if you want to know the whole story. We'll give a, I'm not going to say the PBS version, if you will. You were connected to the Gotti family from when to when?
From about 82 was the original, where I first had introductions to them, till the present, obviously, you know, through some of this turmoil that's going on, but yeah, through the present.
And as we speak right now, John Gotti Jr. wrote his own book. It's online, I think, right now as we speak. It's self-published. I heard an interview he did with our good friend Frank Morano over on AM 970, and I listened to that in preparation for this. And interesting, what he said was that you had no right to write this book about him because you did not have the access that you say you had, and you were a very low-level guy in the Gotti organization. This book tells a very different story. Describe the access you did have and your relationship with him and his dad.
Well, you know, when he does talk, and usually when he's lying, you know, you can't double back on what you say. So if I wasn't
How close were you to him?
Very close. I was his personal bodyguard, enforcer, friend, and I say babysitter.
You use the word babysitter.
I use it because he was incompetent in the street, and he lived on the coattails of his father. And when you're in that life at the time, you don't get respect from anybody, because the real street guys, the real gangsters and mobsters, they know that. You're not going to trick anybody. You're not going to fool anybody. And especially when you go into some of these cans that were in penitentiaries, a place like I was in Brazil, you're not going to make it alone. And you're not going to fool these guys. And I'm talking about not just Italian guys. I'm talking about black, Spanish, white, any ethnic groups, any street gangs, serious guys that you know, can see right through that.
Speaking of seeing right through, you've met a lot of mobsters in your life.
Right.
You ultimately, after being in prison for a period of time in Brazil, you ultimately decided to cooperate, and in fact cooperate with the government, which is why you're here today and not in jail. All right. Why do you believe him?
A couple different reasons, Steve. One, I read all the testimony, the transcripts of the two trials he testified at.
In John Gotti Jr., even though he has a different middle initial, he'll go by Junior right now.
Right. So the Junior Gotti trial in '09,
the Charles Carneglia trial in '09. One ended with conviction, one ended with a hung jury.
And they were being charged with?
Murder, racketeering, all of those sorts of. I've read all of those transcripts, all of the testimony in those trials. I've reviewed documents. I talked to John at length. The one thing that gave me a comfort level, John told me stuff about Philadelphia that I know intuitively. And I know when he was talking about Philadelphia.
The Philadelphia mob.
Philadelphia mob. He was telling me the truth. I know that. I know a lot of the New York story. Now, Brazil, I'm taking him at his word about what happened in Brazil. But I sat down with this guy for hour upon hour upon hour, and the only thing I said to him is, John, you don't have to sugarcoat this. Just tell me the truth. And I believe he did. And the federal government believes he does. Now, John Gotti Jr. can spin it any way he wants. John Gotti Jr. is still trying to control the narrative in this story. That's what this is about.
So John Gotti Jr., by the way, you acknowledged what crimes on your own end?
What crimes did I acknowledge?
So that people understand that you're not holding back about yourself.
No, I was charged originally with 2 murders. I pled out to 6 murders. I discussed being involved in about 37 shootings. Gotti's lawyers at the time, Carnesi, said I was a liar. He said I shot more than that. I said possibly. I didn't deny those facts. I told the government I may have been involved in almost up to 14 or 15 homicides. I didn't deny that fact. I'm not sure what happened to those people that got shot, but I came out, I was truthful. I put my life out there, and I try to be as honest as possible.
So John, you're very close to him. Not his bodyguard, but you call him his babysitter. For those who are watching right now and say, you know, he had this relationship with this guy. How could he ultimately turn on this guy, to use that expression? And the other word that's obviously used, the R word, right? The rat word, that became famous with Sammy the Bull in connection with John Gotti Jr.'s father. You say what to that?
I say that he has, or he tried to have, the audacity to go on 60 Minutes 3 times, stand on the courthouse steps, and say he's not a rat.
That he's not a rat?
That he's not a rat.
You charge that he tried to cooperate with the government on his own?
Oh, he did cooperate with the government in 2005. There's documents proving that. There's documents...
That John Gotti Jr. did?
There's an FBI 302, a 5-page memo.
Tell everybody what a 302 is.
A 302 is a memo memorializing a meeting. John Gotti Jr. in 2005 went to a proffer session with his lawyers.
A proffer is what deal you can make.
Yeah, here's what I can tell you.
Why would he even meet with them in the first place?
Because he was trying to cut a deal, which is the point John is trying to make, is Gotti Jr. can call anybody and everybody a rat. He was trying to do the exact same thing. The fact that it didn't happen, that it didn't get finalized, doesn't change the fact that he sat down with these guys, talked about murders, implicated guys in murders, talked about briberies, talked about extortions. This book has the full 5-page document. So, you know, he can say whatever he wants. Read the document, you come away and tell me what he was doing.
Go ahead, John.
While I'm on the stand against John Gotti Jr.
Which trial?
His trial.
Got it.
I call him Whitey Bulger several times.
You got to understand Whitey Bulger, the case the government was looking for Whitey Bulger, the mob up in, well, not the mob, organized crime activities up in the Boston areas. Why would you call him Whitey Bulger?
Because Whitey Bulger was caught being a double dipper. He's working the streets. Yeah. He's a boss of a crew.
And he wanted nobody to know that up in Boston.
And he didn't want anybody to know. Meanwhile, he's giving up his own guys. John Gotti Jr. did the same thing. He went into the government, and he didn't consummate that deal for a number of reasons. Possibly they asked him to get on a stand. He didn't want to get on the stand. Possibly they asked him to give up money that he had. It could have been 1,000,001 answers.
And possibly they didn't believe him, Steve. That's the other thing.
That he wasn't credible.
That he wasn't entirely truthful. You know, there's a lot of different reasons why that deal didn't happen.
But while I'm in those penitentiaries in Brazil, and those are serious penitentiaries, I'm fighting for my life, I call home, and I get messages that his own lawyer, Charlie Carnesi, gave up information to a skipper in our family that John Gotti Jr.
Somebody who was high-level person in the Gambino family.
In the Gambino family.
The Gambino family, one of the 5 original families that the Gotti family ran. At that point, it was John Jr. running the family.
Correct. And that skipper was, this attorney, Charles Carnesi, was very close to the skipper at the time. He wasn't John Gotti Jr.'s attorney while he profited. He took that information, flew to Florida, and handed it over to a captain there, who turned it over and handed it to our administration. Our administration, when I was calling back and forth from prisons from smuggled phones to help Ronnie One-Arm Trujillo beat his case in Florida, that information, when I told them to look and talk to John Gotti Jr., they gave me that information and supplied paperwork to...
John, you're saying the guys, high-level guys, in the Carlo Gambino crime family knew that John Gotti Jr. was cooperating, or his lawyer was trying to cooperate with the government?
Correct.
And then why is he walking around?
Multiple reasons for that also. There's paperwork out on John Gotti Jr. that implicates certain guys that went to prison for what he was debriefing about.
Yeah.
Now, these guys copped pleas and did different things because they knew he was in, cooperating. Not only that, there's certain other information that could be out there about certain guys. So the exposure of killing him, every one of these guys are on 302s.
Yeah.
Other guys are possibly on 302s. He's in the limelight. They put themselves out there at that time and catch another murder case.
Guys, sorry for interrupting you, John. Yeah. Let me ask you this. For a lot of people who say, you know, this is too inside. You know, it's a world that doesn't exist anymore in the same way it used to, which is true, with RICO and the RICO statutes and a lot of other things. George, let me ask you this. This book is relevant. Why? Beyond, is it John's story that makes it relevant?
No, I think what I hope the book does is deconstruct the myth of the Gottis.
The myth of the Gotti. Well, didn't they have rules? Didn't they have rules? You couldn't sell drugs?
That's one of the rules in the book. You can't sell drugs.
Gotti's rules. What are they?
You can't sell drugs. If you sell drugs, you're going to be killed. But if you are selling drugs, you better kick up to me. That's the hypocrisy of the Gotti family.
You got to so if you are selling drugs and you're kicking up, somehow the rule doesn't exist?
Exactly. I mean, the whole Paul Castellano murder stems out of that same kind of scenario. You know, Castellano was
killed in 1985,
which is when
Sparks
right,
Steakhouse
and that's when
in New
Gotti
York.
Sr. becomes the boss. And Castellano is killed because he knows 3 of Gotti's top associates are under indictment for dealing heroin. They have to be killed. If Castellano lives, Jeannie Gotti,
the brother,
Carniglia, and Ruggiero get killed.
Go back to the father for a second. The Dapper Donna, some called him. A lot of people believe that the Gotti family, sometimes they refer to him as the man's man.
The chief.
The chief. Whatever. There's a part of this book where you talk about Angelo Ruggiero. Angelo Ruggiero is one of the closest people to John Gotti Sr.
They were known as cousins on the street.
You recount a conversation that Angelo Ruggiero had with you in which he advised, you say he told you what about John Gotti and the Gottis?
Stay away from them. They're garbage. This is on his deathbed. He's dying.
Of cancer?
Cancer. John Gotti Sr. took his money, took his brother's drug money.
Because Angelo Ruggiero was selling drugs.
Heroin, specifically. Took his money, it was his partner. Angelo Ruggiero brought John Gotti Sr. into the mob through his uncle, Neil Della Croce. And Angelo didn't have the ego John did, so he took a back seat to him, and he was loyal as a dog to him. And when he was dying, John put it all on Angelo's back. Not only did he put it on his back, he ostracized him through the whole family. Nobody was allowed to speak to him.
You're Albanian?
I'm Albanian.
So you never could, no matter what, no matter how many murders, no matter how many things you did for John Gotti, Sr. or Jr., you could never become a made member of the Mafia?
No, I can't. I could never be an actual made member, but the seduction of it for me was to be another Joe Watts or a Jimmy Burke. That's what they...
Jimmy Burke, who was made famous in Goodfellas.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, who was waiting on the phone when the Joe Pesci called, and it was supposed to happen, and too inside. George, let me ask you. The Gottis, John Gotti Jr., who, by the way, he said he retired.
Yeah.
You're laughing. Can you retire? Did he retire?
Well, here's the thing. You know, I understand that was his defense. 2 things. A Philadelphia mobster came out of prison after he had been in prison with John Jr., met with John and said, Junior wants me to get made, wants to take me to New York. He wants you to take me to New York to get made. If Gotti Jr. is out of the mob, how can he make somebody? Second thing, there's a tape from prison where Gotti Jr. is bitching and moaning and complaining because he's been busted from a rank of boss to capo. This is around 2002, 2003. If you've quit the mob, why do you care if you've been busted? So there's a lot of things in the whole fabric of the story that are disingenuous. John wasn't close to them. Junior was the best man at John's wedding. John was in...
He was the best man?
At John's wedding. And John, sitting next to me, was one of the groomsmen in Vicky Gotti's wedding. So if he's such an outsider, how is he inside on these events? Explain that to me.
Victoria Gotti. Part of your problem?
No, not really.
Was it?
No, not really.
Did you have a relationship with her?
Well, you know, here's what I say about that. I want to talk about the
John Gotti's sister, John Gotti Sr.'s daughter.
Listen, we were kids at the time. I don't want to talk personal business about her. I'd like to keep it to the mob stuff. I'd like to keep it to what I'm trying to send a message.
John Gotti Jr., sorry for interrupting, John, had anything to do with that?
No, not really. He didn't have knowledge, no. What the situation I had with that family is everything they say is not everything they do. Example, Jeannie Gotti is in prison for 50 years, moving heroin. 1997, Jeannie Gotti's my cellmate. If I'm not close, why am I living with him? John Gotti Jr. and Charles Canisi, he held a letter of mine for 15 years, said that I was a low-life guy, low-level this. Well, you only hold that letter for 15 years then, since we're not close, because you're going to cooperate and use it against me, which you did. You had a list of made guys that were potential made guys in your roof. You held that as a keepsake, which you did. These are things that he was hedging his bets to come in and be a cooperator. 2005, this paperwork comes out. He never quit the mob. He was shelved. He was thrown out. He was ostracized. And that's how he got thrown out of the mob. And he's lucky. How he walks around for what he did, I don't know.
How do you walk around?
I walk around, I'm a different guy than him. First off. Second, my message is to all these kids out there. I says, I lived a bad life. I was garbage. I admit that. The difference is I admit what I was.
You said you were garbage.
I was garbage. I lived a bad life. I said, I wasn't I wasn't a hero. I wasn't Martin Luther King Jr. That's a hero, not John Gotti Sr. I says, this nonsense they're trying to sell to kids, and this nonsense that John Jr. is trying to sell to his own kids and his own family needs to be stopped somewhere. So now I'm going to turn my life around. I'm going to make sure that kids get the message. My life today is to keep passing this message, even if I have to lose my life, to kids to stay away from the street. That's lies, it's treacheries, it's things like this about John Gotti Jr., who's ratting, and he's letting the public believe he's some sort of hero along with his father. They're knights on a white horse. That's not the case. These guys are selling drugs. He's got an Uncle Vinny that raped and killed a girl. He's got an Uncle Pete Gotti that convicted somebody on a jury. The public doesn't know these things. Before he was a made guy and the family hid it. Louis Bolletto went to jail because Pete Gotti convicted him when he was a juror. So,
the Philadelphia mob,
yeah,
the New York mob, and Jersey somewhere gets lost in the connection, right? Biggest difference?
New York is the major leagues, Philadelphia's AAA. I mean, that's the way to look at it. And I think any other city is AAA. New York is the center of the universe in terms of the mob. It plays at a much higher level, much more dangerous, much more violent, many more players. But it's the same game.
Yeah. John, finally, what would you want people to take away from this book?
The biggest thing I want them to take away from this book is I don't blink when I talk. I says, and he does. And if you read that book, you'll get the meaning of him blinking all the time.
Biggest regret?
Biggest regret is this life. I says, and I'm going to teach kids not to make sure that they have the pain I suffered, my family, and especially the victims' families. So, I'm sorry for what I did. I'm going to try to get it back as best I can by passing this message to other kids, not to listen to this. This is crap. You have guys, small-level guys like Jimmy Catacamos out there that goes into suicide watch for 6 weeks, and he wants to walk around like a tough guy. That's a low-level guy, but I can go through all of them the same way.
It's not as
It's not glamorous like everybody said.
Yeah.
No, they're not there.
Yeah. John, I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
George is going to actually stay, and we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of all this glorification, if you will, of organized crime on Italian-American reputation and culture in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just stay right there, man.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll be right back right after this.
To see more one-on-one with Steve Adubato programs, visit us online at steveadubato.org. If you would like to express an opinion, email us at info@caucusnj.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato PhD and follow us on Twitter at Steve Adubato.
We're with our good friend George Anastasia, who's the author of Gotti Rules. John Alite former Gotti family member, was just with us, and his book is Gotti Rules, the story of John Alite, Junior Gotti, and the demise of the American Mafia. Switch gears.
Okay.
Appreciate the interview you did with John. Stay right there, but here's my question. This is how many books have you written about the Mafia?
Five.
Five
Books. Yeah.
The glorification of organized crime, the Mafia more specifically. What impact has that all had with the movies, television shows, all of it, on the reputation, your opinion, of Italian Americans in this country?
Well, I get that criticism a lot, that I'm reinforcing this stereotype.
I didn't say criticism.
No, well,
you put the books in with The Sopranos, The Godfather, Goodfellas.
Right.
You put them all in together.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's all part of the same story. But from where I'm sitting,
but you don't write fiction. You write nonfiction.
Right. But everything grows out of the reality of it. To me, I don't see it the way some other folks do. And my flip response to any of this, I mean, this used to come up when The Sopranos were a very popular show, and I like The Sopranos.
Same here.
My answer was, any ethnic group that can give America Antonin Scalia and Camille Paglia in the same generation doesn't have to worry about Tony Soprano being its poster boy. I mean, we know who we are, we know what we've done, and the Mafia is just a small part of that whole Italian-American experience.
But George, devil's advocate.
Yeah, sure.
Because I love The Sopranos, Goodfellas, and your books. You know what kind of fan I am. But you talk about Scalia, you talked about Camille Paglia, great writer. The vast majority of Americans don't know who she is, or even understand who Scalia is. And my point is, for a lot of people, that's who we are, what they see.
No, well, I don't think.
You don't think that's true?
I don't think for a lot of people, and I think we get off track if we worry about people who buy.
You mean Italian Americans?
Yeah,
who
we
get
as
caught
Italian
up.
Americans get off track if we worry about people who buy into stereotypes, because you're never going to convince those folks. You know, there's a great line in a not so great movie called Good Morning Babylon. Vincent Spano and another guy played Italian immigrant carpenters. They're working on a set in Hollywood, building sets, and the foreman is a German American, whatever. He's berating Spano, and he says to him, "Who do you think you are?" And Spano's brother stands up and says, "We're the sons of the sons of the sons of Da Vinci and Galileo and Dante. Whose son are you?" I mean, we have to know where we come from. Gay Talese, in an opening of a magazine piece
One
about
of the greatest writers
Frank
of the 20th
Costello.
century.
He's writing about Frank Costello, and he opens the magazine
Frank
piece.
Costello, one of the mobsters who refused to testify before the Kefauver Commission.
Right. So he opens the magazine piece with an anecdote about a little Italian boy in Little Italy after the turn of the century, running to his father because the Irish and American and English kids are criticizing him and calling him a wop and a dago. And the father puts the boy on his lap and he says, "Angelo, my son, just remember, this country was named after one Italian, discovered by another Italian, and we were giving art and culture to the world when the English were still living in caves and painting their faces blue." You have to know who you are. And if you know who you are, none of this matters. I mean, you know, Andrew Cuomo, Mario Cuomo, there are, look in entertainment, look in politics, look at the Supreme Court. There are only 9 justices.
George, I hear you, and I'm
Two
with you.
are Italian Americans.
I'm with you, and we did one of the greatest interviews we ever did in 2002 was with Mario Cuomo. In fact, we just aired it after his passing, and I'm sure we'll air it again. And Peter Rodino, one of the great interviews we did in the House Judiciary Committee, the Nixon impeachment proceedings. However, there are times, truthfully, that I will feel guilty for my obsession with, and my interest in, but I would call it an obsession with not just The Godfather, but Goodfellas and The Sopranos and everything connected to organized crime. And I know more than I probably should.
Well,
and I ask myself, am I contributing to it? And you say, don't make a big deal about it.
I think the Mafia has taken the values of the Italian-American experience, honor, loyalty, and a strong sense of family, and they've bastardized it to their own ends and used it to justify who they are. I mean, one of the little things.
Because they're not that loyal.
Yeah, one of the little things from this book, when I wrote about it, John Gotti Jr. was formally initiated to the mob at a making ceremony on Christmas Eve. Now, all over
You're supposed to be
America,
with your family eating fish.
all over America, Italian Americans were celebrating the seven fishes.
7 fishes.
He's over there getting made. I mean, you know, that's who he is, but it's not who we are.
Actually, the irony is, in many ways, for a lot of these guys, their family was the family on the streets.
And they ignored or did not serve their real family. Yeah, absolutely. It's very disingenuous, but they use the Italian-American culture, the Italian-American experience to kind of justify who they are. That's not who we are.
And in Philly, right, which you know well, Italian American culture, how strong today?
South Philadelphia was the epicenter. It's no longer because everybody's going out to the suburbs. But yeah, it's, you know, you're identified by your parish, not by your street.
That's right, by your parish.
Yeah, that's the parish you're in. And
by the church you go to.
One of the oldest Italian American churches in America is in South Philadelphia. So, you know, all of that's part of the culture that you come up with. And even when you go to the suburbs, you remember that. But I've always had to have this discussion, not debate, whatever. I don't think I'm reinforcing a stereotype. I think I'm shining a light on the negative, small negative part of the experience, and we ought to know who it is, what it's about, and we ought to demystify it. And that's what I try to do.
But finally, who you are as a writer, as a professional, so much of it is a product of being Italian American.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, the passion, the sense of caring, all of that comes from the Italian American experience. Absolutely, I'm proud of that. I don't try to hide that. That's, I mean, I think, and even over here talking like this, that's who I am. I can't do this when I'm writing. I got to type, but yeah, that's.
Yeah, when you're learning public speaking, I teach public speaking. People say, "What do I do with my hands?" I say, "You use them."
Yes, they're tools, right?
We can put a time behind your back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen, I cannot thank you enough. You've been with us many times in public broadcasting, and I encourage people to read Gotti Rules, your 5th book, George Anastasia. You're one of the great, not just Italian-American writers, one of the great writers in this country. And,
thank you, Steve.
You're welcome back anytime. Thank you.
Thank you,
Courtney. Appreciate it.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by New Jersey Manufacturers, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital, Qualcare Inc., the law firm of Gibbons, P.C., United Airlines, and by New Jersey Natural Gas. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.
An aneurysm almost took my life.
When I needed a heart transplant, survival rates mattered to me.
An irregular heartbeat could have ended my life.
I came to Robert Wood Johnson, and they repaired it through a hole smaller than a dime.
But thanks to robotic technology at RWJ, I'm still here.
That's why I chose RWJ.
At Robert Wood Johnson, being the best means breakthroughs in cardiovascular care happen every day.
RWJ and Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, the heart of academic medicine.